15 things you didn't know about Rolex. Welcome to alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. Hello, Aluxers. We're very excited to have you with us today as we talk about what many consider the most iconic luxury watch brand in the world. Oh yes, it's here. We finally made a video on Rolex, a pioneer of luxury watchmaking and a name more synonymous with opulent timepieces than any other watchmaker in the industry. Rolex was established 112 years ago in 1905 by a German and a Brit, Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis. Contrary to what most people think, it all started in London, not Geneva. Today, the company is privately owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and has grown into an $8.8 billion brand. Last year, they generated almost $5 billion in sales, making Rolex rank 64th in the world's most valuable brands list. Here at alux.com, we strongly believe that a true luxury brand should have a crown for its logo, and Rolex has always been a brand we looked up to. So, if we ever made a video on them, we had to get it right. Enough with the introduction, let's get to it. Here are 15 things you didn't know about Rolex. Number 1. The Rolex name doesn't mean anything, it just sounds expensive. Hans Wilsdorf, one of the two founders of Rolex, wanted to choose a name that would be resonant and easy to pronounce for all people of all languages. He knew it should be short and had to look good when embedded on a watch. He decided it should be 5 letters long, so he started making thousands of combinations from all the letters in the alphabet. He nailed down around 100 names, but none of them really struck a chord with him, until one day, as described by the man himself. And history was made. So now you know, the name is of divine inspiration, but it didn't actually stand for anything when it was made up. They picked it because of its simplicity and because it sounds expensive. Number 2. They moved from London to Geneva, not because it's where the best watches in the world are made, but in order to cut down on taxes. The business was started in 1905 by a 24-year-old with his brother-in-law. They used to import the individual pieces and put them together themselves. 3 years later, they decided to make the pieces themselves. Rolex officially left London in 1919 because the war import taxes were rising fast, and Switzerland made perfect sense for its neutral position and the fact that skilled labor was available in the region. Not only that, but as we've mentioned before, Switzerland is also a tax haven, so it was the obvious choice to make the move. Here's where it gets interesting, and this isn't mentioned in any other video about Rolex. Number 3. Rolex is actually a charity. When we wanted to check Rolex's financial records for this video, we discovered something suspicious. Rolex is actually registered under a charity in Switzerland. How about that? Let us shed some light on this. We know some of you guys actually skipped the intro to our video. Shame on you. In it, we mentioned how Rolex is owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. The Hans Wilsdorf Foundation was founded in 1944, following the death of Wilsdorf's wife. All of the ownership shares of Rolex have been transferred to the foundation, along with clear and strict instructions on how to handle the finances for the company. According to Swiss law, private charities do not need to disclose their respective charitable activities, and as per the company, the donations are kept a secret. There has been no confirmation regarding whether anyone has ever received a charity donation from this foundation. Furthermore, since technically the Rolex brand is owned by a charity, they also get some major tax cuts. If you want to learn more about how to do things like this, we made a video on the countries where billionaires hide their money. It's definitely worth watching. Now, before you guys change your impression of Rolex, it's important to keep in mind that the company was the only thing Hans had in his life. He owned all the shares and didn't have children, so his goal with this move was to ensure the company will survive. Even today, the company doesn't have owners or shareholders. They're just custodians, so they don't own any of it. The employees are paid incredibly well, and since there's no pressure to generate profits for shareholders, the company can simply reinvest all of it, escape taxes, and perpetuate their efforts to perfect their craft. Number 4. It takes almost 1 year to make one Rolex watch. This is what makes Rolex watches so damn expensive. Believe it or not, the watches are all handmade. Despite rolling out thousands of watches every year from its factory, each Rolex watch is still individually crafted. There is the same hallmark dedication to quality. Each individual watch is rigorously tested in stress and pressure tests to ensure they meet Rolex's high standards. The only parts done by robots and machines are those where the robots prove to achieve a better end product than a skilled human worker ever could. The extensive testing they do on every single watch is time-consuming, so it's not unlikely for a watch to take an entire year before it goes out to the market. We know this is an example we've used before, but this is a great time to remember that it takes 13 hours to build a Toyota car. Just saying. This tradition of excellence continues today, and this is probably why Rolex remains a coveted brand by watch enthusiasts all around the world. Number 5. The most expensive Rolex watch in the world is the 1950X Rolex GMT Master, which was sold for $3.5 million. The 1958 Rolex GMT Master was sold just a few months ago at Phillips Auction House in Geneva. This watch was made in 18-karat gold. One of its distinctive features is its striking Bakelite cognac brown bezel. It is rare because most Rolex GMT watches were made in stainless steel instead of gold. For 58 years, this particular Rolex GMT Master was preserved in its unrestored and original condition. But still, what makes this watch worth $3.5 million? Something few people know about Rolex is that they have their own private gold foundry. Yes, people, Rolex makes its own gold. They actually have patents on 3 gold blends and a specific steel compound called 904L. It's no secret that Rolex makes almost all of their parts in-house, but to go to the extent of making your own type of gold caught us by surprise. Apparently, this particular watch has a unique blend of gold, which was never used again, making it the holy grail of Rolex collectors. Despite it being so amazing, we just wanted to point out that this watch didn't even make our top 10 most expensive watches in the world video. That's just something to think about, and maybe you'll want to watch that one next. Number 6. The cheapest Rolex is called the Air King, and it costs $2,200. Yes, you can buy an original brand new Rolex for only $2,200. It gets the same level of attention, but it isn't as complex as the rest of the Rolex watches. The thing is, Rolex watches weren't that expensive in the beginning. For example, in 1981, a premium Rolex watch would cost around $900, but within less than 10 years, the price had jumped to $2,350 for the same model with little changes. After that, they figured out the higher the price and the attention to detail actually worked to their advantage, and today, you can expect to pay around $8,000 to $10,000 for an entry-level Rolex. If you're feeling like shopping for watches, at alux.com/shop, we have a pretty decent collection of Rolex watches. Number 7. The first ever waterproof wristwatch was built by Rolex in 1926. The Rolex Oyster, created in 1926, is the first actual waterproof and also dustproof wristwatch ever to be made. Every other waterproof wristwatch in the world is a mere descendant of this particular watch. It even coined the term oyster, which is still used for waterproof Rolex models today, from the Day-Date to the Daytona. When Mercedes Gleitz, the first British woman to ever swim the English Channel, was preparing for her second attempt to swim across, she received a Rolex Oyster from Rolex founder Hans Wilsdorf himself to take with her on the swim. Gleitz actually wore the watch around her neck, not her wrist, and when she was pulled out half-conscious after 10 hours in icy cold water, the inside of the Rolex was completely dry. Certainly a shrewd publicity move on Hans Wilsdorf's side. Number 8. Rolex was the first ever wristwatch to receive a Class A chronometer certificate. For those of you who don't know what chronometer testing is, it's a measurement of wristwatches' accuracy and precision. It basically certifies that a particular model is incredibly accurate. On July 15, 1914, back when Rolex was still based in London, a tiny Rolex wristwatch labeled Keyless Crystal 2 Line Bracelet Watch was the first wristwatch to ever receive a Class A chronometer certificate from the Kew Observatory in Great Britain, which was considered a hallmark of excellence. This was never achieved before by any wristwatch, and this type of performance could be attained only by large, ultra-complex mechanical watches. One of the rules of excellence Rolex has set for itself is that every single Rolex piece produced is not delivered before it's put through 15 days and nights of rigorous testing by the Swiss Official Chronometer Testing Institute. Yes, they do that with every watch. No wonder it takes an entire year to get one of these out. Even more so, in 2016, Rolex once again changed the game. While most high-end luxury watches are in the plus to minus 6 area of error, they decided to subject its entire production line to a plus or minus 2 per day chronometer standard, which is one of the highest levels of accuracy among watchmakers worldwide. They're actually pushing this as a standard for luxury watches, and their move wasn't so well received by the rest of the industry. Number 9. Rolex proved that their watches can survive anywhere on Earth. After the war ended, Rolex's reputation grew after a British Himalayan expedition led by Sir Edmund Hillary reached the top of Mount Everest for the first time in 1953. Despite the harsh conditions and high altitude, the Rolex watches being worn by all the team members never broke down or even lost a second. In 1960, the U.S. Navy sent a specially designed research submarine down to 35,798 feet below sea level in what we know as the Mariana Trench, and it so happens to be the deepest spot over Earth's crust. Out of curiosity, a Rolex was attached to the outside of the vessel, and shockingly, it ran without losing a second, despite enduring extreme pressures. Just to flex again, they went ahead and repeated the gig in 2012, when Rolex took part in the Deep Sea Challenge expedition, led by filmmaker James Cameron, who made Titanic and Avatar in partnership with National Geographic. They had it outside the submarine and operated it via a robotic arm. The watch performed excellently. Number 10. This is how you tell if a Rolex is a fake. Hey Alexers, let's get this straight. You should never buy a fake. If you can't afford it, buy a cheaper but original brand. You're not doing anyone any favors by buying replicas. We wanted to get this out of the way since between 15 and 30% of searches related to watches on Google are related to replicas. Rule of thumb here is, quality withstands the test of time, so even used, you'll never find a Rolex for under $1,000. To educate you guys just a little bit, there are 3 areas where watches are sold. The white area, which means real dealerships with authorized retailers in premium locations. Gray area, which means people who sell what might be real watches but without a license and authorization. And the black area, those who sell fake watches. Before you get your hopes up, there are very little sellers in the gray area, and you would need a highly trained friend in the watchmaking industry to prove a Rolex is real when it isn't sold with a license. By the way, did you know strippers are actually trained to spot a fake Rolex watch? Here's what you need to look for to tell if a Rolex is a replica or the real deal. First and easiest red flag to spot, just look at the second hand of the watch. Real Rolexes run smoothly in a continuous form. They don't skip from one second to the other. In the words of Jay-Z, rollies that don't tick-tock. Secondly, the Cyclops lens on the face of the true Rolex will magnify the date, so it's hard to replicate. So most counterfeit timepieces will skip this step, and the date will appear the same size. It should also be dead on over the date. Thirdly, just look closely at the finishing of the end product. We mentioned how hard it is to put together a genuine watch, and how attentive to detail they really are. So, no cheap materials. Everything should be like $1 million on it. There should be a serial number when the strap connects, and if anything feels fishy, it's probably a fake. One of the things that's worth looking for is, starting with the year 2000, Rolex embedded their crown logo very smoothly where the 6 o'clock should be. It's very hard to spot it and incredibly hard to replicate, as the glass is of such high-end quality that it can only be cut by diamonds. This is done with incredible accuracy and should almost be invisible to the human eye. Number 11. Rolex got scammed of almost $1 billion by Bernie Madoff. In 2008, the watch world was stunned when Hans Wilsdorf Foundation CEO Patrick Heininger stepped down for personal reasons. He and his father, Andre, had run the organization since Wilsdorf's death in 1960, and there were no warning signs that their dynasty was about to end. Turns out, Rolex had a very serious investment in Bernie Madoff's $65 billion Ponzi scheme. Long story short, until 2009, this guy ran what might have been the world's biggest investment scam. He got caught and sentenced to 150 years in jail. Turns out, Rolex was one of the companies investing in Bernie's fund, and despite the official stance of the company, denying the claim. Ironically, Rolex was Bernie Madoff's favorite watch brand, and his entire collection of luxury watches was auctioned off after he went to prison in order to recoup some of the money. Only $600,000 was raised. Speaking of crimes, this isn't the only one Rolex was involved in. Number 12. A Rolex watch helped solve a murder committed by Canada's most wanted criminal in 1996. The crime happened in London. Albert Walker Johnson was a high school dropout and scam artist from Paris, Canada, who scammed 70 clients out of $3.2 million through a mortgage and investment scam. Wanted by Canadian police, he fled to England with one of his 3 daughters. He started a new investment business with another Canadian expat named Ronald Joseph Platt. When Platt moved back to Canada, Johnson assumed his identity, with his 15-year-old daughter posing as his wife, to avoid Interpol. But when Platt returned to England in 1996, Johnson decided to kill him. He would have gotten away with it too, if he was smart enough to take off Platt's Rolex before dumping him in the English Channel. After 2 weeks in the water, the only identifiable thing was his still-working, waterproof Rolex. Through service records, the police identified the body as Platt's, and it didn't take long to track down Walker. He's now in prison, serving a life sentence. Number 13. Rolex is the official timekeeper for the Wimbledon tournament. If you're a true A-Luxer, your sports interests go beyond football, cricket, or NBA. The partnership between Rolex and tennis dates back to 1978, when Rolex became the official timekeeper of the Wimbledon Championships. This date marks the beginning of a privileged association between two partners driven by the same pursuit of excellence. Despite them having multiple ambassadors, in the world of tennis, their biggest name also happens to be the best tennis player of all time, Roger Federer, who they gladly pay $15 million per year for his endorsement. Number 14. Rolex has over 60% profit margin on all of their watches, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is one of those situations we hate most, when people start breaking down the raw material costs of anything and comparing it to the sale price. But because we're an authority in the luxury watch space, we felt like we had to address it the right way. Yes, the raw material costs for a Rolex watch are way less than what you're paying for it, but that doesn't mean the price isn't justified, because at the end of the day, you're not paying for the raw materials. You're paying for a lot of intangible value. You're paying for innovation, for heritage, for something that took years to be perfected. You're paying for the expertise of the finest watchmakers in the world and their time. You don't think that comes cheaply, do you? This type of information is confidential, but to the best of our knowledge, here's the breakdown of the economics behind a $10,000 Rolex watch. The manufacturer builds the watch for $3,000. It sells for $6,500 and makes $3,500 or 54% profit. The dealer who bought it for $6,500 has additional costs of $1,000, sells it for $10,000 and makes $2,500 or 25% profit. The total profit generated by the chain is around $6,000 for a $10,000 watch. Okay guys, at this point the video is getting pretty long, but let's wrap it up in style. Number 15. The most expensive Rolex you can buy directly from the manufacturer is a Rolex GMT Master 2 Men's Diamond Ice watch, priced at a little over $500,000. They basically took an already expensive Rolex watch and covered it with as many diamonds as they could. You might wonder who in their right mind would pay $500,000 for a diamond-covered Rolex. But let's be honest, you've been an A-Luxer for long enough to know that this isn't even that expensive compared to our previous mentioned watches. So celebrities like Brad Pitt or David Beckham splurged a little to make their wrist shine. We're curious to know, A-Luxers, what is your favorite Rolex watch? Let us know in the comments. We're interested to know how many of you really know your Rolexes. Oh, you're still here? Okay, can you imagine how many people left already? You guys deserve a bonus fact for sticking with us till the end. There's sort of a battle between two guys on who's got the biggest Rolex collection in the world. It's between John Mayer and Mike Wood. Check out these pics. Crazy, right? Okay then, let's see who's a true A-Luxer and watch this video to the very end. Please comment Rolex collector below so we can see who's a true A-Luxer. It also drives people crazy who don't know why we're doing it, so it's kind of fun.